Okay, good morning, members. A wee bit later than planned because of the seminar we've just had. So welcome to this meeting of the Social Work Services Committee. The meeting is being live streamed and will be made available on the Council website for public viewing. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their video when you're not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member is to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join. This will allow us to monitor member presence. I'll now ask the clerk to confirm the sederant.
Thank you, Chair. We've got 2 apologies this morning from Councillors Wood and Wilson. One member currently not present being Councillor Karen Carruthers. Since the papers were issued, Councillor Whitelaw has actually stood down as a councillor. So there are 17 present, 7 in the hall, 10 on Teams, being the Vice Chair, Councillor Bell, Davis, Drysdale, Hill, Jameson, McGregor, McFarlane, Stevenson and Young.
Thanks very much. The information I have is that Councillor Wilson is away in other council business, but if she's finished, she'll join us. So she may join sometime during the committee, okay? Okay, thank you. Obviously, approve remote participation. Sorry, I forgot where I was there. Now, have any declarations of interest? Don't see any. Now, Clerk, can you outline the procedure to be followed at the meeting today? There's an issue about the Care Trust, and I think we can deal with it at the minutes of the last meeting. Can we do it that way? Or?
Well, the minutes of the meeting are up as to whether they're an accurate record or not.
All right, yes, so we'd have to. So are we able to take information from the Chief Social Work Officer as an action that have resulted from the minutes? Is that fair enough? And that can be recorded in that then?
Yes, if there was an action picked up from that, we'd make sure it was followed up. Okay,
thank you. Thanks for that clarity. Okay then, so we'll move on to we don't actually have the minutes in this one because it'll be going to the next full council, I'm assuming, is it?
Minutes are here.
I've not got them. We'll leave it or not. All right, beg your pardon, sorry, I see I've misplaced where I am. So, are we happy to accept the minute as is? And I'm going to let Lillian come in just very quickly and update us on an action that came from the minute.
Thank you, Chair. Members, if I could draw your attention to page 9, and it was the action at 6.4 that action 6, and at 6.2 to 4, where I agreed that I would seek clarity from the Care Trust around the requirement for an elected member and also their meeting and board arrangements. That has now taken place, and I wonder if Councillor Little would like to just give a brief input with regards to that matter. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thanks for letting me in, Chair, and thank you, Lillian. Yes, I met with the Care Trust. They have indeed had a board. They do indeed have a board and have had meetings. They just haven't really had any requirement for a member through that time. But yes, everything's all. I believe you've received all confirmation of everything that's been. But I also like to apologise if I caused any distress to the Trust just raising this issue. But it's really good to see that they've had a really good working Trust board going all this time.
Thank you, Councillor Little. And the Trust have indicated that at this point they do not wish an elected member representation, and they have the open pathway both to Councillor Little and the Chair of Social Work if there's any issues they would wish to raise. They feel that that at this moment in time is sufficient. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. So can we note that in the minute so that we, as an action has been completed?
Yes.
And can obviously governance will then amend the list of outside bodies, because that won't be on it anymore. Are we able to do that?
Yes, yeah, certainly we'll take a note of that, and it would, yeah, but it'll obviously be a part of the review as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. If you could please,
Okay.
Claire, thank you. Okay, thanks very much. So with that little action in place, are we happy to agree the minutes? Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 4, the social work review revenue budget. Janet Sutton, as always, will be online to take any questions on this. The main points to note are the realignment process has indicated some potential pressures in relation to direct payments, which we've just heard about, and kinship care. The senior team are aware and working towards addressing these pressures. We will provide regular updates on the financial position throughout the year. I've just merely got that in first. Janet, have you anything you want to add to your report, or are you happy just to take questions?
I've nothing to add to the report, Chair.
Thanks very much. And by the way, thank you very much for coming in your leave to do this. So it's much appreciated. Any questions? Willie?
Yeah, Chair, just on 3.4, recognising that we are going to face serious problems with regards to energy, fuel, food cost and the impact that's going to have. Is there a process in which maybe some of the resilience groups in the community can access any funds that are available? Because, you know, we are going to find people that are going to be starving, not being able to eat or eat, as the energy recognises here.
I'll get Lillian to answer that, Janet. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Scobie. Just really to advise committee and that we are working alongside the team that are looking at the budgetary impact for our communities. We're part of that working group. We're looking at the cost of living. We're looking to see what other supports are available. And obviously from our point of view, as we become aware of the level of vulnerability that our communities in particular cases are facing, then we will be looking at the individual impact. But overall, we are part of the overall council response through the poverty network and through the cost of living group that are currently working to look at the impact for our most vulnerable. Thank you.
Okay, I'm getting a few hands or indications to speak just now. I've got Councillor Davis, and then McFarlane, and then the Deputy Leader.
Hi there. I'm referring to page 29 in the report, Appendix 1, and I would like to ask why there's not any data available on this table. Thank you.
Janet?
Sorry, Councillor, could you just clarify the question? I'm not sure what you're referring to.
On page 29 of the report, there's a table, and it's basically got there's no data, data available. I was just wondering why that is.
That's the next item, Councillor Davis.
All right, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Sorry.
No problem. Andy McFarlane, and then Councillor Dorwin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. On page 12, item 3.8, it talks about a fee-based scheme. I wonder if Jack could explain that to us, because as a newly elected councillor, not familiar with the concept or the understanding, so it would just help. That'd be grateful. Thanks.
Can you get that, Janet?
Thank you, Chair. Social Work Committee agreed in December that they would introduce a fee-based scheme for foster carers, whereby each foster caring household would receive a set fee per week in addition to the boarding out payments that they received for each child that they had placed with them.
And how is that different from what it was previously, Janet, please?
Previously, we only paid the foster carers for each child that they had placed with them, so the fee was an additional payment that they received per week for being a foster carer.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Chair.
So effectively, Janet, we've augmented the normal, and we put extra into that budget. Am I right?
Yes, that's right, Chair.
Thank you. Who have we got now? Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Dorward, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. With reference to item 3.2 on page 11 and 3.8, kind of adding to what Councillor McFarlane's just spoken about, the fee-based schemes being introduced, fostering scheme. Question on that, what's the impact and has that improved the amount of foster carers? Because I know that was an issue for social work services. And also it says from the 1st of April 2022, due to the need to redirect resources to the Ukrainian settlement project, recruitment of additional carers has been slower than anticipated. Is that going to be an ongoing thing, or is there something that will balance out?
We'll get Stephen to answer that question for you,
Okay.
Janet. Okay. Stephen?
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Councillor Dorward. We introduced the fee as recently as April, and it normally takes 3 to 6 months to recruit and assess and approve a foster care. So we do have a number in the system, as it were. So we would be hopeful of seeing some positive impact as we move forward. But as you've highlighted, we did have to just reprioritise some of the work of the team as our immediate response. But we had some support over the summer months with some social work students, which mitigated that impact. And following the paper at full council last week, we'll be looking at how we've got additional staff across the different services supporting our guests from the Ukraine. So we should see positive movement as we move forward. So hopefully not longer term impact is what I'm trying to say.
I have another question, if that's okay, Chair. So in 3.2 as well, the latter part of that, additional funding received from Scottish Government to increase the number of qualified mental health officers. How's that going? I know that's an issue as well for social work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorwood. We have an ongoing concern and challenge around the recruitment of mental health officers. There is a significant shortage nationally, and we do have a recruitment and retention issue around that particular element of professional qualification, which is again a national issue. What we've done to try and mitigate that is we have increased the Grow Your Own. And we have increased the opportunity for our qualified social workers to undertake that mental health qualification, which I would hope would assist us moving forward. But it's fair to say we've got an ongoing issue, as everyone across Scotland has, for that highly skilled and qualified practitioner in that particular role. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. I know that's an essential part of social work services. Can we keep a watching brief on that, please, Chair? Thank you.
No problem. John Young.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for this excellent report. I wonder if perhaps for future annual reports, could we have some indication on the amount of funding is spent out with the region on other agencies? In other words, where we as a Dumfries and Galloway Council are unable to meet the needs of our people and go to outside agencies, just perhaps a series of trends and hopefully a decreasing trend. Would that be possible to have an indication of how much funding is spent providing social work and care out with Dumfries and Galloway?
Lillian, can you take that?
Yeah, certainly happy to provide more detail. There is some detail within the report. However, if you feel you'd want more detail, then that's not an issue at all. We can absolutely provide excuse me, provide that information as required. Thank you.
I think, Lillian, just as a general question, are we commissioning less out the region than we are in at this moment in time?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we have significantly reduced the amount of agency placements that we have out with the region. Sometimes, unfortunately, we don't have the capacity within our own services to meet the demands of some challenging situations that some of our young people and children find themselves in, but we'll certainly flip the balance from where we had exceptionally high agency placements to reasonably, on a national average, fairly low agency placements. But there are some very high tariff specific cases that we could not meet the security and the safety of the child within the region. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm getting some things coming up here. I see Chrissy Holt wants to come in. Just before you come in, Chrissy, it's fine, everything. Yeah. So it seems the connection seems clear at this end, so it's maybe your end, Chrissy. Have you got a question?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for this great report, Lillian. Just going on to the mental health officers and the Grow Your Own. It looks great that you've got one in the process, nearly done, and 4, is it, working towards it? I'm just looking at the figures for the forecast spend and carried forward for the Grow Your Own projects and programmes. There's nothing in that list. Is there a possibility to ask why and see where we could sort of like get some funding to continue that? If it is, you know, an ongoing issue across Scotland and across our authority to find these qualified people and retain them, where will we find some monies to carry that forward to 23-24, please?
I think that's kind of a political question, I suppose, rather than a social work question. I think almost certainly, well, I can assure you it will be talked about and discussed in the budget setting process, because Grow Your Own has been one of our big successes as a council, particularly in social work. So watch this space, I think, is what I would say to you, because it'll should be coming up in the budget setting group. If it's not, we'll make sure it is from here on in. Does that answer your question, Chrissy?
Yeah, that's great to hear, because, you know, the Grow Your Own programmes that we do are, you know, amazing. And I just think with us needing that and, you know, obviously implementing it now, it's a real need to continue that. That's why I was asking that. So that's brilliant. Thank you for that answer.
No, that's okay. That's no problem. Have we any other questions or anyone else? Okay, in that case, I'm just going to go to the recommendations. They're all for noting. Are we happy to note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4? Happy to note. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Janet. We'll move on to item number 5. The Head of Service End of Year Assessment from the 1st of April 21 to the 31st of March 22. The Chief Social Officer, Lillian's got to present that. It's the assessment of the progress on the delivery of the 1923 business plan for social work for the period from April 21 to end of March 2022. 3 areas out with acceptable limits which will be covered in the report presentation. I can provide the context around PDRs and the complaint processes not meeting the set targets. Lillian, is there anything you want to add to this at this moment in time, or you want to go straight to questions?
I'm happy just to table the report for members' consideration. I did want to just give an overview around the targets that we've not met. Members are aware that our absence is a challenge, and that's as a direct consequence of the some of the strain and stress that our workers have been under over the last 2-year period. So we're working hard to address that issue. I think it's important for me to acknowledge with members that the PDR situation is also unacceptable for us. We fully appreciate that PDRs are an absolute crucial part of the process of making sure that professionally our workers are supported. However, we are uniquely different as a service where we do formal professional supervision. So I can give members assurance that the formal professional supervision is being undertaken regularly and is within all parameters as required, but the actual PDR, the professional development report, which we have to do to meet the council target, is not where we would want it to be, and I want to give assurance that we're working hard to bring that back within an acceptable limit. Just on the complaints situation, you will note that whilst we are below the target, we actually have sought extensions through the SPSO. Oftentimes when we get to a stage 2 complaint, the service user, the complainer, needs some time to actually have conversations with the manager undertaking the complaint, and consequently we find that the timescale, which is a general timescale for the management of complaints, doesn't meet the need under the social work element. So we would rather give the complainer a bit more support and time to hear their complaint. We will get authorisation from SPSO to extend that period of time, but it still then reflects as a late report. So I felt it important to advise elected members of the reason why that comes in under target. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. I think before we start, I'd be kind of remiss if I didn't commend the whole department really for the work they've done over the last couple of years or so, because they've gone way and beyond what was ever expected of them, and I think we just need to have that on record. I'm looking for questions on the end of your report. It's a historical report, mind you, but do you
want me to take the point about page 29 that was raised under the first item?
Yeah, there's one bit here, Lillian, if you could read the bit under at page 29, it was raised under the first item. I think that was the one Lynn asked, was it? So,
yeah, that's right. Thanks very much, Lillian.
Thank you for the question. It's just to advise that data this is a new measurement, so we haven't as yet got the data that would allow us to fully report on that. So that will be coming back to to Social Work Committee on the 6-monthly update of the business plan. So that's the reason why it doesn't reflect at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lillian. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, we've got a flurry now, so I've got Pauline Drysdale, John Young, Andy McFarlane and Paula Stevenson in that order. Pauline first.
Oh, I'm trying to get my camera to go on, but it won't, so I'm saving you that pain. Oh, there it is. No, it's not. Sorry, I'll just speak. Thank you very much, Chair. Lillian, thank you so much for the report. It's always extremely detailed and, you know, gives us lots of good information. So thank you for that. I did want to just note that there was some comments about lights being on, would you believe, in Irish Street through the night. I think it was on some sort of Facebook page, dare I say it. But actually, the correct answer to that is that social work have been working hard in Irish Street for the emergency out of hours service. And it's certainly been running 24 hours a day. So congratulations to all the team and for all their hard work during COVID. What I wanted to ask Lillian was, thanks for taking my call this morning. On page 32, the older person's home care cost per hour is £19.25 an hour. And for weekly residential care costs for older adults, it's £204. Lillian has kindly updated me. That's the cost to the council. So if we look at, say, a person at home receiving home care costs, that adds up to £139 a week for 2 visits a day, which is about the average. For personal care is about £269 a week, and for 4 visits a day for those more in need, it would be £539 per week. Can I just ask, Lynn, I know this is probably under the remit of the IJB, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but could we, going forward, have a little bit more detail on how the new home teams are going to work? We're trying to encourage people to receive care at home in their own environment where they, you know, they're better cared for, I suppose. So I don't know if that's under your remit, but just for maybe the next report or the report after that, if we could have an update as to how the home care teams are going. But Chair, I'm sure you'll put me right if that comes under the remit of the IJB. Thanks very much.
Yes, it is an IGB matter, but Chief Social Work Officer is happy to update you, Pauline.
That's great. Thanks very much, Chair.
Yeah, Lillian will bring a report on that to what, December committee? December committee. Okay, is that okay with you? Yeah.
It's really most. I'm waffling. Sorry. Most grateful. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. John Young.
Thank you, Chair. Page 21, 3.8.3.1. There's quite an incredible statistic in there that I would like developed. The funding of £34,000 to a third sector organisation attracted an additional £470,000, almost £500,000. So, I mean, I find that incredible, to be quite honest, and I wonder if we could have a wee explanation of this magical trick of spending 34,000 and getting a return of 470,000. Thank you.
I'll get Stephen to answer that, John.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and it is a remarkable statistic, absolutely. What's happened here is we've developed an excellent relationship with a number of our third sector providers. In this instance, it was Abalawa in particular, and the partnership approach that we've used attracted significant investment from Cora and other sources, and that's been ongoing throughout that period of time. And we've also got indication that moving into the future, we will have similar sums coming in, but we will have to look at elements of continued financial support from my service, which we've got in place. So it's really more about the partnership approach that people expected to see around whole family support, in particular, and a big move away from that 100% match funding. So that's been really, really successful.
Does that explain it, John?
It does. It's absolutely excellent partnership that benefits everybody involved. So thanks very much, Stephen.
Okay, thank you. Andy McFarlane.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to go back to Lillian, the point she said about the stage 2 complaints, and the fact that even though we ask for an extension, it is still considered to be out of time and what have you. Clearly, that's a national strategy, or it's a national decision as to how that works out. Are we able to say how we compare to the rest of the country? Because you would imagine that other social work departments have similar issues, but how are we performing nationally and compared to others? Would be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. Obviously, I don't have that detail today, but I can certainly get that detail and circulate it to members. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Paula?
Hi, Chair. Thanks for that, and thank you, Lillian, for bringing this report to us. Just two questions. I'm going to start on page 67. It says there, I must thank all foster carers, adoptive carers, kinship carers and supported lodging providers for what they do, and I think this is something that the committee should reflect as well and give thank you to those that support us. It does mention
Paula, Paula, can I come in? That's the next item. What's your second question?
Is it? I'm on the wrong one. Oh, goodness. Right, okay then, sorry. Well, but no, I'll come back in there.
Are both questions on the next item?
Page 14. Page 49, just on that development review that you were discussing, it does say there that there is staff on secondment that wouldn't need this review in place. Do you know how many staff that actually is that are on secondment? And a last minute question when we get to that agenda.
I don't know the exact number, but I can certainly get that for you. It will be fairly significant, but it won't have a huge impact on the number. Thank you.
Yeah, will we just share that with the whole committee? Yeah, thanks very much. I think that's all the questions for. Oh, sorry, Willie, and you come.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at page 21, 3.8.3.3. Plan has now been, has the following priorities, and one of those is housing accommodation. And Stephen and I have had long and protracted discussions on housing accommodation without reference in a particular case. But we're looking at 109, I reported to full council only last week, we've got 123 children living in homeless accommodation. And I really look to this one maybe to ask Stephen a question, because I'm looking at page 29 of the report and a lot of the data isn't available. And it's whether we could get a report back to us in terms of the number of children who are living in unsuitable accommodation and or who are in permanence within the accommodations here, because it keeps saying that data not available. It's whether we can get some kind of understanding of the work that's going on with children around housing accommodation.
I'll get Stephen to answer that for you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Scobie. I would need to speak to colleagues in the homeless section about that, because the figure of 123 that you mentioned is children generally across Dumfries and Galloway, as opposed to those receiving social work support. So what I could do is I could work with colleagues in the homeless section, see how that's presented, and it may well be that it's part of their business already, but I'll find out and clarify that off table and let you know, if that's helpful.
Willie, just before you come in, Stephen, can you just clarify, there was a time there when children were on that register and stayed on it. Was that the looked after children register? I'm getting mixed up here. So they were counted more than once, you know, because it was they were getting repeated, I think. So it looked worse than it really was. But can you keep me right on that?
It is two separate issues. So in terms of inappropriate accommodation for children generally, because of housing need, that's one separate issue. The children who were looked after by ourselves, who have numerous moves, is the data you're thinking about. So it is two separate issues, and that data around the number of moves will be picked up in a separate report around our corporate parenting duties, because that's where we would report that.
No, I'm happy with what Steve.
Do you want back in, Willie?
There are two separate issues in terms of children living in accommodation, what type of accommodation, how that affects their well-being, their mental health and so forth. And it would be good to get a report tying in with our homeless department, so that we have an understanding in social work in terms of should we be involved or not.
I think it's a fair ask, Willie, and it stops kids fondling between the floorboards, if you excuse the expression. But yes, absolutely. So we should work, and we should have some combined report that actually shows how we're working together. So I totally take your point. Whether it's here or whether it's at the strategic housing when they report, or whether it's both, I'm not that bothered, as long as we can show that we've been working together. That's the main thing. Yeah. So we can leave that with Lily and Stephen to take forward the officers in the other department. Anybody else? I don't see any questions. Just one from me, and I think we just need to be absolutely clear about the PDR part. That's the personal development of the worker, but what I would have called support and supervision, what you call the professional support, that's taking place. Am I right?
Yes.
So that's the bit where, well, we wouldn't have liked to say to our staff that we don't care about them, because that's far from the truth, right? But our statutory responsibility is getting met in terms of the professional supervision of cases. Am I right?
Yes. Chair, happy to give you that assurance. The professional supervision is taking place regularly. It's the actual PDR that is part of the overall council responsibility that we have to improve on, and we're working hard to improve on that. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarity, Lillian. Yeah, come in.
Sorry, Chair, a little bit lethargic there. Lillian, again, thanks for the report. It's really provides a really good insight into the challenges. And in terms of exception reporting, sorry to go back to this in terms of sick absence, just a couple of wee questions. What's the biggest cause, and is it mainly long-term or short-term?
Thanks, Councillor Dorwood. Without a shadow of a doubt, the level of stress, work-related stress, has risen. We also, as with other services within the council, have an ageing workforce. So particularly in our adult care services, so our home care, our in-house care and support at home service, where we do have a significant challenge around an ageing workforce. That's very much a very heavy lifting job, if you like. So we've had quite a lot of our staff have had, some physical injuries at work, and that's linked into both the role and their own physical and personal health challenges. So twofold for me, it's that kind of stress-related illness and also some physical illnesses. We have some high levels of longer-term illness, which are, we've unfortunately got a number of staff who have had over the last couple of years cancer diagnosis, and those are longer-term illnesses which we're working to support through. But generally, I would say to you that the increase has been on short-term absences, and a number of that is related around stress and fatigue. So we've had a number of information from GPs, etc., that our staff are suffering fairly high levels of fatigue, and to use the terminology, burnout would be a fair comment to make. So we are looking at the supports that are available for staff in the shorter term to try and support them back at work. We have a real issue with recruitment and retention, so those staff that remain with us, staff that are in post, are carrying a higher burden, and obviously this afternoon we're going to do an input to members around the Setting the Bar report that talks about what should be a normal caseload for social workers in particular, and we are higher than normal around the caseload. So all of that comes together, and I can't really emphasise enough the impact of the last 2 years has had on our staff in particular. And it was interesting that somebody had raised with Councillor Drysdale about the lights being on in Irish Street. We are a 365-day a year, 24-hour a day service. We never stop in social work around that. So I think we have to just recognise that impact for staff. Thank you.
Okay, Linda. Do you want back in?
Just short, Chair. Don't worry. Just again, it would be useful to have a watching brief on this as well, because it does seem it's come up in a couple of committees in terms of the higher levels of sick absence, and what's concerning for me certainly are the high levels of stress, and also Lillian, you touched on there the maturing workforce and the challenges you've got around there in terms of the physical impact of the role. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one last question for me, because I don't think there's any more. How aware are the supervisors and staff of people just soldiering on because they know if they go off, they're leaving their comrades, their workmates, whatever you want to call them, to carry the burden that they're off? I mean, is that a factor right now? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, it's incumbent upon myself and Stephen and Rebecca as the senior leaders of the team to make sure that our managers are fully up to speed with the supports and services that are available. We have got a range of wellbeing pathways for our staff to access, and part of the professional supervision is for seniors, for team leaders, for managers to make sure that all staff have access to that support and that they have a clear way to escalate to ourselves when they are concerned and needing to offer additional support to members of staff. So I'm confident that everything is in place for our leaders, our managers, to make sure that they support the staff in whatever way they can. However, we have to acknowledge that they are under immense pressure at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that explanation and that assurance, actually. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so are we happy to go with the recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? I think we've scrutinised it fairly stringently. Yeah, okay, thank you very much, everybody. So we'll now move on to item number 6, the Chief Social Worker Annual Report covering the period 1st of April to the 31st of March 2022. I think it should be 1st of April 2021 to March 2022. The Chief Social Work Officer is required to prepare an annual report to the local authority as required by the national guidance on the role of a Chief Social Work Officer. And then focus on the demand and response, given some examples of the detail. For example, over 25,000 referrals were made last year, and in the breakdown will come out of this. And I think I'll just pass it across to Lillian rather than read two more, and then I'll let Paul in with the first question when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. As stated, I am required yearly to provide you with an overview of the delivery of social work services within Dumfries and Galloway. I always enjoy preparing this report because I hope what it will do for members and for others that are interested in the service that we deliver, particularly our citizens, they will see the enormous amount of work that we as a service are, one, quite rightly required to deliver on, but also the way in which we try to ensure that we meet the needs of the service users and the demands, quite rightly, from the local authority on social work services. So I always enjoy preparing this report. I hope this report does reflect the amount of work that staff have undertaken throughout this period of reporting. Again, I have highlighted within my report the huge amount of demand that has been on social work services throughout this period of time. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but my last two reports I have taken time because I think it's absolutely important that we reflect on the amount of work that the staff have been required to undertake and how we have met the demand on the service. I'm not going to go through every point of the report, but what I would like to say to members and what I would hope that you've picked up throughout the information provided. You will see almost at every level we have had a huge increase of demand for social work services. The referrals have increased significantly. The demand for our service has increased significantly. We have tried varying and different ways to deliver the service. We have, I think, tried some real new ways to meet the demand, and staff have come along with the change required to make these changes to deliver more effective services for the council. And I hope I've managed to reflect that, because it's important for me to acknowledge the amount of work that goes on behind this report, which is my report, but all the delivery of the services is other people's, and I just have the privilege of being the Chief Social Work Officer for Dumfries and Galloway. So I'm hoping that members will see throughout this report the increased demand and how we've tried to meet that. Thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Okay, thanks. In that case, thanks very much, Lillian. Go to Paula first, then Willie.
Hi, Chair. Thank you very much. It's just on page 67, obviously, we see, Lillian says, I must thank all foster carers, adoptive carers, kinship carers and supported lodging providers, because without them, we would not be able to deliver our services. And I think that's something that, we as a committee should say as well, as a big thank you to everyone that helps and supports, as well as our social workers and everyone else that works under social work. But just on going back to the foster care, it does say that we have added in extra payment towards them, but what are we actually doing in the community to try and actively recruit more foster care workers? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stevenson. Yeah, I mean, we recognised, and I think Stephen touched on it earlier when we were talking about the set payment, that we recognised that we had a challenge around how we financially supported our foster parents, and that's why we made the proposal and have made the changes around how we encourage folks to become foster parents and how we support them through that. The team, the fostering and adoption team, offer a significant amount of different levels of support to our foster carers. We run seminars, we run groups, we have sessions with them to support them in their role and function, because you're absolutely correct. A significant amount of our delivery of our requirements would not be able to be done without that support of foster parents and, of course, our kinship carers. We do run regular campaigns to encourage folks to come to work in Dumfries and Galloway as foster parents and kinship carers. There is an ongoing challenge around where some national organisations will have better terms and conditions, and that's a national issue that all local authorities face. But what we offer is support, training, and actually a 24-hour helpline for our foster parents to be able to access support as and when they need it. So I think we have a significant wraparound service that offers that support, but of course we're always looking at any other way of supporting our foster carers moving forward. Thank you.
You okay with that, Paula?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Just obviously it's a public meeting and hopefully some people will listen to this, and if they've thought about it, hopefully they'll give it some very serious consideration, knowing that there's that support roundabout. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a point very well made, Paula, and I'm wondering if, when's the next round of PR to try and recruit again, or I know it's going on all the time. Stephen, can you come in with that, yeah?
Yeah, we've recently run targeted advertising and also some social media presence over the summertime. So that's where we've seen the increase in the number of assessments we're currently doing. We will ordinarily repeat that a minimum of every 6 months, but it really depends on the workload of the team at the time, what the need is, and we might accelerate that and bring it forward. So currently we will be looking at into January, February of the new year before we have another campaign.
Yeah, so I saw that it's kind of coinciding with the children's panel looking for extra people at the same time, which is not very helpful, but both very worthwhile. Okay, so I'll move on. Willie?
Yeah, just to concur with the remarks made by Lillian in terms of staff, and while it's Lillian's report, it's the people who are out there, the social work and so forth, who are really doing the work, and it's good to Lillian recognise, I'm sure she does. But it's I would commend Lillian in a report, when I look at page 60, commend her in the sense that it's the first time I've actually seen the figures written down for Dumfries and Galloway, where we've got a statistic of child poverty are in particular concern of 6,141, which reflects the 26.2%, which is above the Scottish average of 25% in Dumfries and Galloway. And the number of people I speak to who don't believe there's poverty in Dumfries and Galloway would astound you, particularly around children. And it's really, are we doing enough, or can we do enough? Because the figure just seems to be increasing while we're above the average. Are we doing enough to try and get this figure down? Notwithstanding, that figure, in my opinion, will only increase with the cost of living. And there's another aspect to this, and I only heard coming down on the radio, being late for the first meeting, Andy, listening to the radio, but people with disability, they may not be able to put on their medical equipment, equipment that keeps them alive, and because of the cost of living, they will not be able to switch on this because they can't afford the electricity, and more than likely they could die. And again, within the department, have we got the capacity and the resources to deal with such issues? One, in children and getting the figures down, who are living in poverty, and the other one, people now who will not have the ability to put on the energy to keep their machines going, to keep them alive.
Thanks, Willie. I'll just hand you over to Lillian in a second, but there's a crossover here between Communities Committee and this committee, and it's like something we talked about earlier. We need to make sure the two departments are working together just to satisfy ourselves that we didn't miss anybody. But Lillian, I'll let you in.
Thanks, Councillor Scobie, and couldn't agree more with you. It's a real challenge for us moving ahead. And that's why it's really important that members of my team are part of the whole challenges around poverty and the cost of living and the work that's been done through the Communities Directorate on behalf of the local authority. So we will absolutely be at the table to make sure that in terms of children, that the needs and the requirements are tabled. And obviously that will be a wider decision for communities and for the full council. In terms of the challenges around citizens who have disabilities and the choices moving forward, we're acutely aware of some of the impact, particularly around some of our elderly and adult services. The element for me is that we will need to make sure that we keep as close an eye as possible on those service users, but we ultimately don't have any funds that we can help support to pay the electricity, for example. However, we need to make sure that all their benefits are maximised, and in any way that we can help them to access support either through charitable application or through a social fund or whatever, then the staff will do that. The element that I have a growing concern around, and I have tried to reflect in this report in particular, we have become acutely aware that we have more referrals from citizens and families in particular that have never asked for help before. And I do worry that there will be citizens out there that haven't asked for help and don't know where to go for the help. And that's where the wider campaign of making sure that folks know where the services are and the availability will be really important through the coming months. Thank you.
Willie, quickly, do you want back in? Yeah.
Please, and then the reason I asked the question earlier in terms of what the process was, and I met with a person from the community, and it was to try and build the resilience groups and how they can help, hence why I ask about the capacity. And if we don't have the capacity, have we got a process in place that the resilience groups that were invaluable during lockdown, I think they'll be even needed greater in the cost of living crisis than what we had in the lockdown. And it's that we are working with the communities, and there is a process in which they're able to access any funds that could be available from the group that Lillian refers to in more than one occasion. And it's so that we know people who are out there who don't just switch off their machine because they can't afford. The resilience groups could pick that up, and we've got to be working with communities to deliver when we don't have capacity.
I think so. Well, I couldn't agree more with you, because we really need to make sure it's a whole council approach to things here, because it's no one department's job, it's everybody's job, including the members of the public and organisations, third sector partners, whatever you want to call them. Right? Everybody has to put their shoulder at the wheel here, because it's a monumental job to try and get on top of this. Anybody else? Linda?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lillian, for this extremely comprehensive report, a very interesting report, which does highlight on page 59 and 60, as Councillor Scobie has already mentioned, the challenges in terms of poverty, the demographics, the ageing population, the lower earnings, need I go on, that we face in Dumfries and Galloway, which actually makes the Council's ambition to make Dumfries and Galloway the place to live and work even more relevant at the moment, and I think something to focus on over the next while, which it does. But also what this highlights for me is the breadth and depth of service provision. It's huge. And I think, it's absolutely essential. But local services are actually in the best place to the needs of local people. That's very much highlighted in this report, and they can respond accordingly and extremely quickly. Delivery capacity is challenging, but the response has been impressive. And now on to my question, is page 76, unsurprisingly about justice services, perhaps. Page 76 and community payback orders, CPOs. What's good for me to see is that we have the highest number of CPOs imposed per 10,000 population, 42.6 compared with the national average of 21.2. However, I'm conscious of the challenges potentially in doing that in terms of capacity. So what I'd just like a quick overview, not too long for that. What are the major challenges in doing this? Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Dorwood, and obviously Catherine Knipe is here, who will be doing the next report on unpaid work, which will give a bit of detail to this. However, I think the bit that I certainly want to reflect on is that the team have worked incredibly hard to do things differently on unpaid work, to make sure that folks that are given that alternative to custody get an experience that will hopefully help them from reframing from offending behaviour. And we've got a real buy-in from our local sheriffs. They like what we do on unpaid work. We've got a significantly lower breach rate because we have a much more proactive way in which we try to help folks get through their orders, and the team have done things kind of thinking out of the box. They've done things differently. So I think in a way, one of the challenges for us, we are victims of our own success, because the funding situation for unpaid work comes directly from a Section 27 allocation. And I certainly would take me longer than this committee to explain the funding formula. However, the element for us to consider is that the funding is always paid in retrospect. So you get the funding once you've done the work, which is an interesting aspect of service delivery for Section 27 unpaid work. However, what we've tried to do is to make sure that we continue with the programmes that we developed during lockdown in particular, which proved to be highly successful. We've got the support from the sheriffs because they like what we do, and to date we've managed to do that within the allocation of the Section 27. However, it would be fair to say that that allocation will be challenging moving forward, because it is a cash flat allocation under that funding formula for the delivery of justice services. Thank you.
Just a short comment. It's extremely impressive statistics. So I think that, justice workers should be congratulated on that. It's something that might be hidden in a report, but it's an extremely impressive statistic. So thank you.
No problem. That's noted. I'm sure we can pass on the. Georgia, you want to speak? Yeah.
Yes, please. Firstly, I agree that it's really commendable, the work that's been done right across the board, and in particular this particular piece of work. I would like to ask the question, and I don't know, you're already doing enough work in social services, but it's a community payback order, but is there any scope to actually help these folk, and whether they're young or old, into employment or into training, give them some sort of guidance while they're on this, their community work? It could also garner funding. I'm thinking of Skills Development Scotland, I'm thinking of Scottish Funding Council, I'm thinking of encouraging folk to maybe take up an apprenticeship scheme or return to work, career changer opportunities. There's just funding available for colleges and employers to try and develop these sort of things to take the next step. It is a community payback, but I would like to see, like the likes of the initiatives on drugs and alcohol abuse and things like that these people get help from, to try and help them into some form of training or employment. I think it's a golden opportunity. These people are doing this, they've got time and space to think, and if we can offer them something, even if it's only guidance, and I think that would be a step forward.
George, I'll get Lillian to give you a quick answer to some of that, and get Catherine to give you a fuller explanation when we come to her report, which is immediately after this. Okay, so Lillian.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor. Absolutely, under unpaid work, part of our 9 requirements is to look at employability and look at the skills that we can assist folks develop to make them more ready for the employment market. But as Councillor Ferguson has indicated, Catherine will go over a bit more detail of how we do that in the next report, which is on unpaid work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, George. I think that's everybody in there, was it? Yeah. So in that case, then, no more questions. I'll go to the recommendations. We're just asked to consider the performance of the social work service in respect to key duties and responsibilities for which the Chief Social Work Officer has overall responsibility as detailed in the appendix. And I think it'd be fair to add in there that we're, as a committee, we want to compliment the Chief Social Work Officer and their entire team for the work they've done over the last number of years in particular.
Thank you.
And can we make sure that's minuted, please? Yeah, thank you. We agree with that? Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. So we'll move on now to the item number 7, the community payback order. This report is for 2021 with figures until March 31st, 2021. Is that right, Kath? It covers a period of COVID-19 response moving into recovery. Catherine Knipe, sorry, Kath to me, will give an update on how we continue to develop the service. Kath, is there anything you want to update here, or are you happy going straight to questions?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. It was really just to highlight that this is the report from 2020 to 21, so it does take us back to the early days of the pandemic. That's purely the fact that we're bringing this report now is because we're restricted on the timings in terms of Scottish Government and Community Justice Scotland requirements as well. Other than that, just happy to go to questions.
Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. That's a great report, Catherine. Thanks for this. Our local stats and figures, as pointed out already previously by Councillor Dorward, are just fabulous. And it's always nice to hear the comments and quite often little stories, but this time we've got quotes from the service users themselves. What page? I think it's page 92. My question. Yeah. And it's just really, you're talking about this as a historical, where we have the types of unpaid projects. I was just wondering if how close we are to getting back to fulfilling the hours within community and community organisations, following on from COVID, because I mean it's a really important part of this service, and it goes a long way to lowering the reoffending figures. So that's one. I've actually got two questions, if you don't mind, Chair, but that's my first question. Thanks, Catherine.
That's fine. Thank you for the question. I think in terms of where we are now, whilst I'm reluctant to say back to business as normal, it is a lot more recognisable as business as normal now than clearly the period of time that was covered within the report. We have had to have an overall significant shift towards outdoor working, and the areas where we're probably still playing catch up is in terms of personal placements. Clearly, as soon as the pandemic struck, those were the first placements that closed down, and it is taking a long time to get those back up and running. But in terms of getting service users back into physical attendance, we're back as things should be. Our group sizes are back to the normal group size. And something else just went out of my head that I was going to say, I'm sure it'll come back. But yeah, effectively, as things stand now, in terms of throughout the pandemic, there's been a lot of discussion about the backlog of unpaid work hours. I'd kind of prefer to see that as we always carry a number of outstanding hours that we're working with at any one time. And certainly the numbers at the moment, we are not significantly over what a standard routine pre-pandemic outstanding hours situation would be. Thank you.
Could I come in with another question? Thanks, Chair. This time, it's just a wee bit of clarity. I don't understand this phrase. On page 96, it says, for those service users subject to a supervision requirement of a community payback order, we conducted much supervision via telephone and MS Teams. Could you explain? I mean, if someone's needing supervised, how do we do that by telephone and Teams?
Indeed. The community payback order, when imposed by the court, there are 9 requirements that can be added along with as part of the community payback order. Unpaid work is one of those, and that's obviously what this report concentrates on. One of the other key ones is supervision, and that is when the service user will meet with the social worker and work through specifically those issues related to the person's risk of reoffending. Now, certainly at the point that this report covers, face-to-face contact had to be reduced. We focused on those higher risk service users who we really needed to see face-to-face, but a lot of the contact became through Teams, through phone calls, but because the focus of that work is more your kind of talking therapies and worksheets and things like that, that was appropriate to be done through MS Teams and through the phone. Clearly, unpaid work is a far more physical face-to-face thing, so we did try and keep face-to-face contact as high as it could be for that as well.
Sorry, just come back in.
Please
no, that's great. I totally understand the need to, and how the telephone and Teams would work. So this is not supervision while undertaking the hours, while doing the hours. This is to do with all the other things leading up to that.
Yes, the supervision requirement is a separate requirement. So someone can have a community payback order, they can have a supervision requirement, they can have an unpaid work requirement, they can have a programme requirement as well. It's the choice of the sheriff, obviously based on the recommendation that we make within the report, but the sheriff can choose which particular requirements he wants to impose.
No, that's great. Thanks very much. And thanks for the report, and thanks for this service, because I'm a huge supporter of this, and I think it's how you've managed to work through this through COVID and still have such high figures and still manage to do this. It's to be commended. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much. Now I've got a number of people wanting in. George, can you quickly tell Kath what the question was we were going to answer? Again, just a reminder. And then I'll move on from that. I'll go to Willie and then David. Okay, so George first.
I know whether I'll try and keep it shorter this time. What I'm wondering is what sort of support have we got for these people when they're going through their community payback to encourage them into further training or help them into work, career changing, and possibly there's funding from Skills Development Scotland and the Funding Council, because I know that the colleges are keen to offer these opportunities to diverse people. The other thing would be the developing the young workforce to try and identify employers that would be keen to give these people with their troubles a support as well.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, where to begin? I could wax lyrical on this for a long time. Certainly, encouraging service users to be able to either join the employment market or to return to employment is one of the key focuses of unpaid work. We work with such a massive range of individuals in terms of risk and need that how that is done really depends on the particular service user we're talking about. At the basic level, someone attending unpaid work, at the very least, will introduce a degree of routine, a degree of structure. They've got to attend on time, they've got to do a shift. So that helps. That's, I suppose, the most basic level. We do, through the projects that we do, we encourage service users to learn new skills. In terms of the recent work that has been done at the Annan unit, we know of two specific examples where service users were involved in helping the development of those sites, and that led directly to the pair of them getting employment within the construction industry. So we've got a few specifically really good examples. The comment I made earlier in terms of personal placements have been the area that the pandemic has had the greatest impact on, but certainly they were always useful in because they were personal placements. It was more like an individual work experience. What we're doing at the moment is we are in discussions with various departments across the council. We started these discussions pre-pandemic, but we're certainly picking them up again now. In terms of that work experience placement that I think you are referring to, clearly that isn't without its challenges. One of the key issues with unpaid work is that the work undertaken cannot replace that of paid employment. So we've got to be very clear that any work placements that we find are in additional to employed and paid placements that any organisation would have. But certainly at the moment, we're having some promising discussions with a couple of departments across the council in terms of could unpaid work service users attend and be a supernumerate part of the workforce. Clearly what's important there is matching the abilities and the need and the risk of the particular service user involved, and then clearly they need to go through all of the induction processes and ensure that there is someone directing them in terms of the task involved. But we are hopeful that the progress that's beginning to be made will result in something more fruitful. In terms of the partnership working that I think you referred to, clearly as part of the Community Justice Partnership, where employment agencies are involved, we are in regular discussion about how we can work together to achieve the best outcomes for our service users. I hope that answers your question.
You okay with that, George?
Just a wee follow-up very quickly. That was a very, very good response, and that's great to hear. But I'm wondering, and you're quite right, that you have to, the person needs to be in the right place, and the employer, for example, needs to have the right skills and understanding. One of the things, I'll use farming as a good example where these people might get an opportunity, because there is a demand for farm workers, etc., and possibly forestry, is some initial training. The compulsory work element could involve some training so that they can then be employable. My other query, you don't need to answer it just now, but I'm interested in what an employer would get to have the confidence to take on an offender, for want of a better word.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, that's clearly important that if we're expecting someone to take on one of our service users in a placement, that they feel supported and have a contact. Each person subject to unpaid work has a case manager who will be completely aware of whatever placement the person's involved in and what the training is hoping to achieve and what the person's abilities are. So they would certainly be available to support the placement. We also have the community payback officers whose specific role is to develop projects, develop placements, and act as that link as well between our department and any placement provider. Thank you.
Okay, that's it, George. I'm going, Willie.
Thank you.
No problem. Willie, David, and then Andy Mack. Okay, in that order. Willie?
Just building on what George was saying there and recognising what you said in terms of paid employment, that we're not doing this with our community payback orders. But I'm looking at page 92, and I'll premise this on my request on the back of that. I'm seeking information in terms of what it would cost the council to return to cut and lift in our cemeteries, knowing that the climate may not be right and proper for that, but nevertheless that's what I'm seeking. And I'm looking at this in terms of the variety, the types of what you're doing: litter picking, painting public toilets, walking curbside clearances. So some of those could be identified as council work, where we don't have the resources to actually do this work in terms of capacity budgets and so forth and so on. And what I'm asking is, requesting anyway, could our policy of cotton leave in cemeteries, could this be added to it, that we have people on community safety payback look at the lifting of the grass in our cemeteries? That does cause huge concern, the length and breadth of Dumfries and Galloway, just as a request.
Lillian's got to take that.
Thanks, Councillor Scobie. I think it's a really interesting question. However, we need to really be very careful around how we would undertake some of that work. If, as Kath has described, we could do it as an additional support, but we couldn't take on the responsibility. And one of the issues around for communities colleagues is the frequency that they would require us to be part of that support. What we need to make sure is that we don't make a commitment, because we never know how many people we would have on unpaid work. We never know how many hours we would be able to give to that particular provision, and also how that might impact on wider asks from volunteers, from third sector, etc., etc. So it's not a straightforward answer. I appreciate that. It would be something we always give consideration to as a support service, but we certainly wouldn't take that on as a full-time service for the Communities Department. Thank you.
Willie, do you want to come back?
Yeah, please. And I recognise everything you're saying, Lillian, in terms of, but that would be the same for grass cutting that's done there, and I don't know if that's part within the council. All I'm asking is that, or requesting is that we look at this and see what the implications are, and still trying to protect. We do not do it as a policy, and it's really just to see if it's something that we could look at as a project, and I'd be grateful if you would.
Thanks, Councillor Scobie. I mean, a lot of, like, you know, if we take the grass cutting, it might be that we've done it with a voluntary organisation. So they might have asked us, for example, to clear the National Trust have asked us at points to clear pathways. So that would be part of what we would consider grass cutting. And charities may have asked us to go and assist maybe some of their bases and their, you know, their areas that the public would be in. So they're not none of these are necessarily council projects. But we always give consideration, but we certainly can't give a commitment that we would have the capacity to undertake that task. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. David?
Yes, Chair. I just want to ask, payback community work, unpaid work, is it correct if people turn up and for some reason, i.e. weather or other, work is not done, are their unpaid hours included in their total hours? It reduces their hours. Is that what happens? Thank you, Chair.
Hot potato, this one, isn't it?
Yes, thank you. Again, the challenge is ensuring that there is always something available for an unpaid work service user to be involved in, regardless of the weather. In the unit, there is a big board that has plan A, plan B, plan C, and that is often a weather-dependent situation. So we'll have a plan A for if the weather's fine and the group can get out, then the group will get out. If for some reason the weather's particularly appalling, then we can have a plan B that is often a unit-based project. One of the real benefits in Dumfries and Galloway is that we do have sole use of our unpaid work units, and therefore that I think has probably had one of the most significant impacts in our ability to work the number of hours that we have, because we've been able to restart as soon as restrictions have allowed, and we've been able to develop the units so that we can maximise the work opportunities. So it is a last resort that if someone turns up for unpaid work, that we would turn them away.
Just one other point, Chair. Many people say to me as regards this community payback They never see anybody within the town centre or in the surrounding area. Is there a reason for that, or they're not used in that area? Thank you.
Thank you. We deliver unpaid work across the whole region, but we would not identify those workers. We would not identify folks on unpaid work. There's no identification while they're undertaking the work. We will acknowledge through various avenues the work that we've done, but during the period of time, for example, if someone was cutting the grass, the members of the public would not necessarily know that that was an unpaid work squad. Thank you.
Does that help, David?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
I see, Andy Mack, thanks for withdrawing your question because it's been covered. Tracy?
Just a comment, Chair, just saying I'm glad that we've gone away from the days when people had high-vis jackets with community payback on them. It was very disrespectful. It wasn't good for the project itself, so I'm glad that we've come away from that.
Absolutely. David?
Is it correct that during COVID, many hours were just written off?
Certainly, as a result of the coronavirus legislation, the Scottish Government made the decision to reduce the number of hours imposed by 35% on those orders that were open at that time, with the exemption of offences that involved sex offending, domestic violence and stalking offences. In Dumfries and Galloway, that resulted in approximately 10,000 hours being withdrawn.
Okay, but we still delivered the most hours in Scotland?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so it's important to note, we were actually leading Scotland in delivery, David. That's the point I'm trying to make. Your point's well made. I think Kath's given you a very honest answer. Yeah, okay, you happy with that?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else now? Linda? Linda?
Chair, since you ask. Thank you. And again, it's a comment and a congratulatory one. I know this is going to Community Justice Scotland, so it's a kind of an abridged report. But one of the things at 3.8 on page 88, and again, I think congratulations to Dumfries and Galloway Justice social workers in terms of innovation and creativity, is about the blended learning workbooks. And again, you know, it allows people, what we're saying there is a short paragraph, an opportunity to reflect on behaviour, which is always very useful, and support for individuals whose English isn't the first language or who have issues with reading and writing. Would you just like to talk a little bit more about that? I'd like to hear a bit more about what that is. And that is continuing, isn't it, as part of the process? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, blended learning packs, I think, have been really, really helpful in enabling us to achieve the hours that we did, particularly during the lockdowns. Service users enjoyed completing them. Obviously, we got a range of standards of completion, but that was reflected in the hours they were then awarded. The blended learning packs are kind of a weird one, because typically that type of work is what would be included during a supervision requirement. So it was key that we kept the focus on unpaid work and didn't drift too far away, but certainly very useful. I think particularly the first one that we developed was specifically around the COVID-19 pandemic, because often our service users don't hear the formal messages of government. So it was a really good opportunity for us to ensure that our service users knew their responsibilities about isolation and just what was expected of them. On the back of that, we developed them. The next one was the one relating specifically to the CPO, because I think often there can be keeping that link between the behaviour that you were involved in and then the resulting CPO as a court order. It's really important to keep that link there. and particularly during COVID, where it was taking longer for cases to go through court, ensuring that that link was there was key. And then the other two workbooks related to drug and alcohol issues and relationship issues. Clearly, it was important that they were only given to those offenders for whom that work was appropriate. Clearly, we wouldn't have been giving the relationship workbook to any person who was involved in domestic abuse, but certainly it was useful for people to begin to think about those ideas. And as the Community Justice Scotland report alluded to, we were able to share those workbooks with colleagues across Scotland, and they've been recognised as good quality pieces of work. As restrictions were lifted and focus turned to getting the people back into attendance, there was almost a time we were a victim of our own success, because people enjoyed doing these workbooks at home, and we're now saying, right, you can stop the workbooks, you can come in and you can pick up a shovel again. So there's been yes, that's been a focus of our, but certainly the workbooks remain available where it is assessed that that is an appropriate, and probably now falls more into the other activity remit of unpaid work that's always been present. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Kath, just a question before you finish. Thanks very much for this. And you go into great detail about the work we do. One thing, I suppose this is a bit of personal knowledge, isn't it? The huge variance in the people who come under your care is massive. I mean, it really is. I mean, I think to be fair, well, obviously folk will realise what coming from a position of knowledge here, because you get people at getting here at 9 o'clock in the morning is actually an achievement. And it can go totally the other end, lawyers, doctors. So I'm wondering, it is your report, whether we should actually be reflecting the spread, or because that brings a challenge in itself to the workers, the officers who are looking after, trying to help them. Even when you go to a qualified lawyer and say, we've got to put you in an employment programme, it's crazy, but I get the point. So, I mean, is it something we would normally, or we could report on without identifying anybody?
A very interesting question, and I think one that I would need to ponder. I'm just sort of thinking in terms of the information we do get, we do know whether our service users are in employment. The detail around that employment we could certainly get, but certainly the underlying point that you make about the absolute range of people we get, from those who struggle to get out of bed in the morning, or indeed don't have a bed to get out of and yet still are able to come, to those highly trained professionals. I think as well what's also changed, particularly since the CPO took over from the community service order, is we've got to meet the needs of those with greater physical disabilities as well. Mm-hmm. We've had a sad case of a woman who was terminal cancer, and we were providing work activities for her to do as the court had decided to impose an unpaid work order. We've had men in wheelchairs who come along and attend mm-hmm. the groups. Back in my day when I was writing reports, someone's physical ability to undertake unpaid work was always taken into account. The shift to CPO moved away from that, and the challenge for us is that we've always got to find some meaningful, worthwhile work for service users to be involved in.
Thanks, Kath. I see Andy Mack's got a late question. Andy, you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just to pick up on your last comment, Chair, talking about identifying the sort of work that people may be in when they've been asked to do unpaid work. And you mentioned without identifying anyone, but the fact that convictions are a matter of public record anyway really should mean that it shouldn't be an issue.
Well, I think we'll leave that one for the lawyers to argue about, Andy. Okay, but your point's well made. Is anybody else? No, I don't think so. I'll just move to the recommendations then. So we're asked to note the completion of a requirement to submit a report to Community Justice Scotland, which is the appendix. And in 2.2, how our unpaid work service delivery changed in response to the coronavirus pandemic and associated restrictions, whilst enabling service users to complete as many hours of unpaid work as in previous years, and at the same time staff assisting and responding to the welfare needs of vulnerable people across Dumfries and Galloway. Happy to note all that. Kath, thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you indeed, and as ever there is an open invitation for you to come along and visit our unpaid work units and see what it is we do. If you're interested, just please contact me.
Through you or through Marion, or how would we get in touch with you?
You can contact me directly, I don't mind.
So it'll be carthen.knipe@dumgal.gov.
Yes, I think it's in the report. So,
right,
so
okay.
My details are there.
Right, okay, or through Marion, yeah. Okay, we got that. Thanks very much, Kath.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, okay, we'll move on to item number 8, the Transformation Programme Early and Effective Intervention Family Support. It's to present elected members with an update on the progress of the Transformation Agenda and Early and Effective Intervention Family Support work as requested. This covers the ongoing positive development of the service. Stephen?
And Sarah's here as
well. And Sarah is here as well. Good morning, Sarah. Welcome. Or it's afternoon now, I think. Yeah. Stephen, is there anything you'd like to add, or do you want to go questions?
I could just add something very briefly, Chair. This is a quick update report from the previous one that we received back in June, and I wanted to just draw your attention to 2 pieces of new information. And at 3.6, we make reference to the cost of a child who has a social worker and a child who's supported by the service and is also on an order. This is very new information and research, so we've included that. So what you'll see from this intervention is we're working with more families across the whole of the service, but less of those children on a supervision order. So that's a cost avoidance of over £40,000 per annum. And we will develop that ongoing research, and we will deliver more detail in terms of what we think the total cost avoidance has been when we report in the future. And similarly, in terms of new information at 3.16, we mentioned some of the data around our colleagues in Aberlour and the number of contacts they have with vulnerable people at a much lower level. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 new bits of information. And what Sarah and I will do for committee in the new calendar year is come up with like a 2-year appraisal of the service with much more detail and analysis around the complete impact. So, like I said, just wanted to draw your attention to the 2 newer pieces of information there. And Sarah is here to assist me with any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. That's 40k for every child. Right, okay, thank you. I'm looking for questions. George?
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for all the work you're doing. It's exceptional. I spoke to Stephen about this before, and it's something we can maybe do better is on page 99, 3.11, we talk about the family support service having an important role in linking home and school. How effective is that? We know that children from problem families, and sometimes the children can be the problem, the school can be the problem. How effective are we? Are not just getting children into school, but how effective is the system in supporting those young people to be successful at school, not just academically, but to be comfortable and happy at school? Because I've had various situations over the piece as a school counsellor, and it's incredibly difficult for a child from a difficult family situation to actually achieve at school. and sometimes even getting her through the door is a real challenge. I'm just interested, how effectively do you think you're working with the school? I'm thinking of the social workers team working with the pastoral care, the teachers with responsibility for the success or failure of children at school. I know that's a really difficult one, but it's something that's quite close to my heart.
Yep, I'll respond. So I could respond generally, and then Sarah might give an example of some of the specific work, if that's helpful. In terms of the whole system, Councillor Jameson, you're absolutely right, it is challenging. Colleagues in schools have that pastoral care duty, and the social work function's quite different. What we have noticed over time, and I think highlighted since the schools reopened after the pandemic, I know we're speaking of the past, but we're still kind of seeing some of the impact, is that some of our children are having much more behavioural difficulties, and that highlighted the gap that's grown over the years in relation to general support to families and some specific supports. So one of the things that early and effective intervention is trying to do is fill that gap. Now, we've got much more work to do, and we've had some recent investment through the whole Family Wellbeing Fund, where we've taken on staff very, very recently, and one of the key elements of that is to work with schools more closely to identify those children and families who need supports, so our staff can assess what the supports might be and get them to the right person at the right time. In relation to some of the specific work that the team do, Sarah could probably give you an example of what the team have been doing with some specific families where it's been identified that the child struggled to get into school, or the child has presented behaviours which have been tremendously difficult to deal with. So Sarah, I'll pass over to you in terms of a specific example to highlight the work that's ongoing.
Okay, thanks. I think obviously it's about building relationship with the family, trying to understand what the difficulties are. If sometimes parents have struggled themselves with school when they were younger, or they've struggled with being able to communicate, or they themselves have got difficulties with anxiety getting out, being able to advocate for their child. So it's about getting to know them, building up their confidence, being able to look at ways that might be creative to get the child involved and back to school, building up relationships with staff, looking at individual ways that we can do this, whether it's taking the child into school, helping the parent take them to school, looking at a multi-agency approach in terms of supports they might have for their mental health, supports in other areas. It's building up the whole picture. There's a couple of instances that I can think of. We had one boy that we worked with, and one of our male members of the team, he started to build a relationship with this boy who just wasn't leaving the house at all. And he gradually got to know him, got to develop interests that the boy had due to him, and then gradually introduce school into that, build that up, look at what the school could do and suggest that might be ways of getting him back into school. And it was a slow process, but that helped the school to understand a little bit more about the boy and what his interests were, and how they could sort of develop that and develop his confidence for the future. And it was specifically with that long-term view, how could this boy achieve for the future? How could we help him if he engaged in school now? How would that help him to get into work in the future? And that's kind of the approach that we take. Although sometimes our support is relatively short-term, it's all about looking to the future and how we can help the family have the supports they need to keep that going long after we're involved, and also building their links with other services in the community, with Aberlour, with other supports that are depending where they live, so that we can keep that going, so they've got either a specific teacher, youth worker, whoever that could be, that could help them in the future. So it is a multi-agency plan and a kind of long-term support, and it is about relationships, really. Does that answer that okay?
You okay with that, George?
It certainly does answer it, but it's very, very time-consuming and resource-heavy, and that's the challenge that we all have, because there's a lot of children out there and families that might not get that that relationship, and the good relationships need to be built up over time. It's all about effectively using resources, but it's incredibly valuable to the people that are involved. And my plea would be that we need to support you just as much as we possibly can in order to support the parents and the young people and the schools, so that we'll get that common theme throughout everybody and getting the right people at the right place at the right time. But it's very challenging, so good luck, and we're here to support.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think if I'm picking up what you're saying there, Sarah, this is a multi-discipline approach we take across here. So, for example, we could refer young people to the youth work team. There's a whole lot of different answers in that. So it's very, very full answer. So thanks very much. Willie, you've got a question?
Not so much a question, Chair, just a comment, and just on the point you're making, and you've referred to it on more than one occasion today about working across the council, and not only the council but out into the community. And I think it's highlighted in 3.13 in terms of the importance of the Amazing Summer Funds, and that was through Mark Malloy in providing that, and then that did give a bit of relief to families during the summer following the lockdowns and everything else. But there's also the Christmas time, and Sarah can confirm the amount of work that's going on in terms of Cash for Kids and the ability of community groups like the Community Reuse Shop that have been able for a number of Christmases to provide families who need a food hamper at Christmas. And that's done with the support of social work, providing names to the groups. And I think it does highlight the intervention that's needed so that families do feel that they are valued and they're part of the community. So well done in that respect.
Thanks for that, Willie. That's really nice to hear. Anyone else? Sorry?
Pauline Drysdale.
Pauline, can you come?
There's the camera working now. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report, Sarah. It's very interesting. I was going to bring up 3.13 on page 99 as well. Well, went on to mention the winter programmes, but I was going to ask you, with the additional funding that's available through third sector, do we continue this great outdoor work during the winter? There's a heck of a negativity sometimes in Scotland that therefore, people think they can't actually continue going outside. We have a massive resource in Dumfries and Galloway with all the mountain bike tracks, the new paths up Criffle. And when you see some kids going up there, often with DAV and other groups, you see the difference it makes to children's lives, and they actually turn around and say, I really enjoyed that. I wasn't on a computer all day. They didn't know they could achieve those sort of small steps, shall we say. Have you got plans to continue it over the winter, Sarah? And if so, could you update me on that, please? Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. So in the summer, obviously, we got specific funding that allowed us to do things with families and take them places. But the things that we do are creative, and we try to help families to get involved in doing things that don't cost a lot of money, that they can just do without our support in the future, get families used to doing things together, and also doing activities like that, getting a balance between the work that we have to do within the family home, the work. It depends what issues are, but it certainly helps build relationships and helps build confidence for young people if they're taking part in different activities. So yes, it's always kind of a mixed plan of things we have on with families depending on what their individual needs are. But we did have specific funding with the Amazing Summer Fund that helped us to do more. But yeah, it's about that balance and being creative, which we do try to be.
Thanks, Sarah. Anyone else? No, just a question from me, Sarah or Stephen. 316 at page 99, we've invested in money, third sector organisations, we've already heard about that 470k. The bit I'm really interested in here is the That additional funding increasing to 70k will leverage external investment further and working collaboratively. Brilliant. It's the next sentence that it's no concerning me, but I'm wondering if there's an angle here for us. Support from this funding to our children and families includes promoting good health, meeting emotional need, support for learning, meeting boundaries and keeping a family routine, and support to attend health appointments. Did the NHS contribute to this?
That section's in relation to the work that Aberlour do across the piece, and part of the partnership approach I mentioned earlier that drew in some of that funding was around children and family social work, Aberlour, and the alcohol and drug partnership, which has the NHS element to it as well. So it was that collaboration approach that really brought that in. So that partnership is the close working relations and the like. So financially, not specifically, but what the ADP has recently done is give us funding for the next 5 year, which we can recruit additional staff and put extra money into the third sector as well. So we've got that commitment for, I think it is 5 years, yeah. So yes is the short answer to my long explanation.
I think I'm a reference for that application. Just for members who don't know, you've referred to CORA a number of times. What is CORA?
Okay. CORA is a national organisation that works closely with the Scottish Government around families affected by substance misuse, various other things, and they are one of the main kind of funding bodies which utilises Scottish Government funding for third sector and partnership arrangements. So they are overseeing an awful lot of the funding that's available for the third sector in partnership with more statutory partners as well. So that's the organisation that they are, and they've been extremely supportive of the work that we're doing, as you can see by those figures in Dumfries and Galloway.
Thanks, Stephen, for clarifying for those who might not be aware of what CORA was. I don't see any other anybody else want to speak. So I'm going to, sorry? Chrissy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi. Just on, it's a great report, and thanks for all the hard work that, yourself, Sarah, and all your colleagues are doing. On page 99, 3.12, it says our staff are currently undertaking therapy training to support and rebuild sustained relationships between parents and children, focusing on play, nurture and love. Is that just the social work staff, or is that being fed into any type of educational staff as well, so that they can then support what the social workers are doing through the therapy and have an understanding of it in schools? Is that something that's been done or something that could be possibly looked at, please?
Can you get that, Sarah? You're muted, Sarah.
The staff get a range of different training and supports to help them to develop their skills and work with families. Sorry, I'm not sure if I've got the whole of that question. Could you repeat the last bit a minute, Chrissy?
Yeah, it was to do with the therapy training to support, work to rebuild and sustain the relationships with the parents and children, focusing on play, nurture and love. And it was to see if the social work had the support with the education team, so that teachers were aware of the specific training that had been going on with the social worker that was working with those particular families, so that it could be possibly followed through within the school environment. And they were aware of, the focus on play, nurture and love, and the training. Are they getting the training as well? So,
well, what we are doing is we're spending more time in schools. We're more available to the staff in schools to talk to them about and understand what each other's doing, to understand the child's within school and within their home environment and other environments, to build up that knowledge and learn about the different programs and training that each of us are doing, and being able to pick up concerns for children early on. The thing that we are we're about to do is Incredible Years, which we're going to be delivering again, and we're going to be recruiting a coordinator to help us with delivering the Credible Years, and that is very much a joint programme. We'll be doing that with staff from education, mainly early years in education, with social work staff, health staff, and we're all so each of the programmes are going to be run by a joint team. So that is an example of something that we're all doing together.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. Will that progress up into primary as well? You know, with the nurture and the play continuing through primary. I know early years is predominant for that. But just to see if it will continue through the primary as well to support some of the children that maybe haven't been picked up in early years and are developing, you know, difficulties with relationships as they go through the primary stages, so that, you know, they're fully supported, ready to go on for lifelong learning in secondary.
Yeah, well, we have recognised that obviously during COVID, a lot of children missed out on their education in the nursery years, and that has impacted. So we've kind of expanded the age group, particularly with the Incredible Years that we'll be delivering the programme to parents. And that's been recognised nationally, obviously, as an issue that we need to make sure that, you know, a lot of things have been missed out at that stage in terms of, well, everything really, routines, getting in socialising, learning to play with other children. So it's important that we help parents and work together on developing that for children. So yeah, that does continue into their primary years.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. That's really good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I don't see anybody else now question, so I'm going to go to the recommendation. We were asked to note the progress and achievements of the Family Support Service over the past 3 months, as outlined in paragraphs 3.7 to 316. Are we happy to note? I think, again, we commend that team for the work they've done. Some very innovative work that's obviously taken place, and it's recognised by this committee. So thank you very much to you both on that. We'll move on to agenda item number 9. Which is just the minutes of the Public Protection meeting of the 21st of June, which I think was before we had appointed anybody to it, if I remember rightly. Yeah. So it's just for noting. Are we happy to note? Thank you very much. Thanks very much, everybody. Just one last word before we go. Members will be aware that there's a session this afternoon starting at 2 o'clock. Both in person or online, covering 4 issues: the setting the bar, the National Care Service, the promise and child protection. I think that then this will be a chance to get speaking to the officers and really understand what these 4 really important developments are all about. So I'd urge you all to attend if you can, if you come in online. But again, I'm assuming that any presentations will be circulated, because it's a 43-member presentation. It's not just this committee. So I'll see everybody else or most of you at 2 o'clock. Thanks just now. Thank you. Bye-bye.